I'm Leon Course. I'm the fifth generation on the Course farm here. My great-great-grandparents bought this place in May of 1868. I farm currently with my wife Linda and our adult daughter Abby, and a young man who is going to, with Abby, become the next two generations of the farm. Mackenzie Wallace is his name. We milk about 50 cows, a mixed herd of Holsteins, Jerseys, a few Fleckviehs, and crosses of those three breeds, plus some red and white Holsteins. I realize that, any pollutants that we put in the water here on this farm have a way more widespread effect. I can remember when I was growing up, we spread manure all winter, and the field across the road behind the barn has a slope to it. And if you went down to the other side of that field in the springtime when the snow was melting, the water running down the brook was brown. No secret why. And so, it's been a long time evolution of going from there to where we are today. But today our manure is kept in a concrete manure storage. We have capacity for 7 months of the year, and all of the wastewater from the milking facility also goes into that storage. So our wastewater is all land applied. We typically spread that in late April and early May, and again in October. And it is basically self-irrigating because there's so much water in the manure. We used to spread in June also. We've tried to evolve away from that for two reasons. One is that we don't have enough days in June to do everything we need to do without spreading manure. And the other is that for some reason, most of our 26 landlords did not like us spreading manure in June because the odor can be pretty significant. It got to where, they'd tell me in February if they were having a family reunion or a wedding or something, I don't want any manure here anywhere near this time of the year. So unless spring is terribly wet and we can't spread manure because of mud, we don't spread in June anymore. But when we did, we had a year when we spread the manure in June and it never rained until after we harvested in late July. So there had been no rainfall, and yet we got a good crop because that manure had washed itself to the root zone because of all the wastewater. Yes, there's a downside. We buy a lot of diesel fuel to haul that manure, but it's very effective fertilizer. The only fertilizer that this field that we're standing in has had is cow manure. And you can see that there's plenty of grass here. It's been harvested once and grazed once already this year. We're a certified organic farm, and we have approximately 350 certified acres. Of that, though, we own about 350, but 200 of that is woods, and that's not certified acreage. So we only own about 150 of the 350, and the rest belongs to 26 other people. The manure storage that I mentioned earlier was one of the earlier ones. We built the manure storage in 1991, so it's 33 years old. And previous to that, we had given up spreading manure in the wintertime to some degree, but we were field stacking it. And when you don't have flat fields, some of it still runs off when you field stack it. So we built that when, at the time, FSA was cost-sharing manure storages, and the total price of the whole manure system was $96,000, which was a big swing for a then 50-cow farm, but they paid for about half of it, which made it much more feasible. We also created a paved barnyard at about that same time, so that when the cows went out in the wintertime, they weren't going out in the mud, and that was creating some more runoff. A few years after that, we started putting in cattle lanes, and at the time that we built most of ours, there was a man who worked with NRCS, Kevin Kaya was his name, and Kevin came one day to talk about one that we were considering, and we already had built 2 or 3. And I told him that I had discovered a problem with cattle lanes, and he looked a little concerned. And I said, well, the problem is I've learned that the more of them you have, the more you want, because they're such an asset when you're trying to get the cows back and forth to the barn during a wet time. So one of the original ones is right behind me. This is where the cows go at night for almost all of the grazing season. So there's nightly traffic, and it had gotten so that it was, punched down into the sod 8, 10, 12 inches up across the field where they commuted back and forth. So that was one thing we did. At the same time, we created a spring up there that's down over the side of the hill a little ways. So we put a solar pump in it, and it pumps to a storage tank at the highest elevation up there in the pasture, and it gravity feeds 8 water tanks in all of the paddocks where the cows graze at night, and 1 in the barnyard where they come and go when they're coming in from pasture. And it eliminates them going back and forth to the barn. Before we did that, they would go in after they'd been out 2 or 3 hours to get a drink, and then they'd go back to the pasture, and then back to the barn sometime early in the morning, and sometimes even out again. And now they stay out in the pasture till they're ready to go in. They do have access to the barn at night, and typically they go in sometime between 1 and 3 in the morning and eat some hay, which we keep some in the bunk. And they're typically in the barn when I go to milk at 4 in the morning. We had some really good field technicians that would come here and encourage us, I think is how we got started. And after we built the manure storage, because it was such a huge project, we got to know them pretty well because they were here a lot that year. And as the staff turned over, we already had got involved with the programs, and we just kept doing it. We had a really difficult time when we created our first stream crossing, because the pasture where it is, the cows use the stream for water. But we didn't want them going through it all the time just to cross to the grazing on the other side. And I maintained that if we built a crossing, they would use it except when they needed to get a drink. NRCS didn't really believe that. And I had a real hard time convincing them that we were going to build this without me signing on to building fence to exclude them from the stream. They finally caved and did it my way, and the cows can still access the stream. We have added water tanks to the pasture, so they're less likely to drink from the stream, but they only go down in the stream when they want to drink. They don't like walking through the mud. So if there's an alternative, they'll use it. What you typically do is take the topsoil off, and in our case, I have a brother who was in the excavation business, which helped getting this done. So he would take the topsoil and resell it where we built the cattle lane and credit us for the topsoil, so that helped with the ultimate cost. And then put down a layer of gravel and then a road fabric like they use under gravel roads to keep the mud from coming up through the gravel. And then on top of that, there's some of the time we've used gravel, some of the time we've used something called Sure Pack, which is a kind of a mixture of gravel and crushed stone, but it's something that packs well so that the surface of the cattle lane is fairly hard packed. We actually used a vibrating roller when it was built to pack it down like you would see when they're building a new road. And then just the cow traffic actually packs it somewhat. And for the most part, they've held up fairly well. We have a few places where they're on a hill and they've washed, and we've got a place just over there where there's a low point and it does get a little muddy. My thought is, I pointed out those catch basins where the culvert water, those collect gravel. So one of these times when I clean it, I'm going to bring it out and fill that low place in the cattle lane with the gravel. We've hosted quite a few pasture walks over the years and farm tours, and I find that other farmers are a great resource. I've often said I rarely go to another farmer's farm that I don't learn something. Sometimes it's something that I maybe should try, and sometimes it's something that maybe I shouldn't. But farmers teach farmers pretty effectively.